Good morning and welcome. Today's announcement is being made by the Honourable Shannon Phillips, Minister of Environment and Parks. Also joining us, special guests, Dr. Andrew Leach, Associate Professor and Academic Director of Energy Programs, University of Alberta School of Business, Ryan Basjo, President and CEO, Capital Power, and Ed Whittingham, Executive Director, Pembina Institute. With that, I will throw it to Minister Phillips.
Well, thank you. You know, if Alberta wants better access to world markets, then we're going to need to do our part to address one of the world's biggest problems, which is climate change. Nobody knows this better than the people who work in our energy industry. We have been consulting with stakeholders closely since we assumed office. Now it is time to begin to address those issues. So I'm here today to make two important announcements. First, as a first step, we're going to renew and update our province's current expiring regulations governing carbon emissions. Second, and more important, I am pleased to announce that Dr. Andrew Leach has agreed to chair an advisory panel that will comprehensively review the province of Alberta's climate change policy and make recommendations toward a permanent set of measures. Our goal is to be in a position to make at least a preliminary proposal in time for the COP21 World Summit in Paris at the end of the year. Let me begin by telling you how we will renew and update our province's current regulations. Then I'll describe the important work we are asking Dr. Leach to lead. Alberta's current emissions regulations are set to expire June 30th. They were adopted in 2007 and have never been updated since. They were a significant step in their day, but our regulations are now obsolete and do very little to either address the climate change issue or to earn us greater market access by being seen to be doing so. To give you a sense of it, taken overall, Alberta's regulations price a ton of carbon in Alberta at an effective rate of a little less than $2 per ton. We have to do something about these regulations because they are set to expire at the end of this month. As an interim measure, the Government of Alberta will therefore renew our province's emissions regulations in their current form. Further, we will update these regulations by phasing in an increase in the carbon rate from $15 per ton to $30 per ton by 2017. And we will also phase in an increase in the stringency of these regulations from 12 to 20% by 2017. By updating these regulations, we'll demonstrate that we're beginning to get serious about this issue. These interim measures will reduce Alberta's carbon pollution by an estimated 13 megatons in greenhouse gas emissions by 2017. Let's be clear. No other jurisdiction and no energy market is going to accept that this constitutes an effective climate change policy. We need to do better. We need a climate change action plan that is achievable, effective, and strikes the right balance between the environment, social factors, and the reality that Alberta is and will remain an energy-producing province that relies on the energy industry for much of our employment and much of our prosperity. We need a climate change plan that is bold, ambitious, and will bring Alberta into a new era of responsible energy development and environmental sustainability. It needs to address emissions from all sectors, not just the petroleum industry. If we get it right, our environmental policy will make us world leaders on this issue, instead of giving us a black eye around the world. The future of energy jobs in Alberta depends on access to global markets, and that requires us to get this right. Andrew Leach is an associate professor at the Alberta School of Business, specializing in energy markets and environmental policy. He has written extensively on environmental and energy issues. He is independent, he is smart, well-informed, and he is going to help us ensure that stakeholders and Albertans get to have their say on these issues. And then he will help the Government of Alberta frame an effective policy. Mr. Leach will lead an expert panel that will be announced in the coming days. This panel will release a discussion guide later this summer, setting out the issues. This paper will set out the goals we are pursuing, including the shift to a greener economy, improving how we use energy, strengthening our reputation on the national and international scale, and accelerating innovation and technology. The panel will conduct a careful consultation to seek the views of stakeholders. We've asked Dr. Leach to be sure to carefully consult the energy industry, leaders in the broader business community, municipal leaders, Indigenous peoples, civil society leaders, and average citizens. Let me make one last important point. I will scoop my colleague today, Energy Minister McQuaig-Boyd, by letting you know that the province of Alberta will shortly also be announcing a royalty review. We well understand that these two initiatives need to add up, talk to one another, and work together. When this work is done, Alberta will have a modern, effective climate change strategy and an appropriate royalty regime that serves our province environmentally, socially, and economically. Some will argue that we aren't going far enough on these issues. I say to them, we are serious about making progress. Some will argue we're moving too far and too fast. I say to them that more of the same would be the worst thing we could do for our energy economy and for the future of our province. More of the same means more roadblocks, less market access, and missing the opportunity to build a greener, more prosperous economy with a future all Canadians can get behind. Thank you.
And I'll turn it over to Dr. Andrew Leach.
Morning, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Phillips, for the kind introduction. This is a wonderful opportunity and one that I'm really excited about. As Minister Phillips said, when you talk about climate change policy, in particular in Canada, Alberta is essentially the second word you hear in any conversation. And when you talk about climate change policy in Alberta, oil sands is going to be the next word that you hear after that. The first thing and most important thing I want to emphasize to you today and the mandate for our panel is to go much beyond the emissions of oil sands, the emissions of large industrial emitters, and the specified gas emitters policy, which you're seeing updated today. Our mandate will be to look broadly throughout Alberta at not just the sources of emissions, but also the opportunities which exist within the economy to address those emissions and to improve our performance on that front. So as the Minister said, over the coming weeks, we'll finalize our panel membership. We'll create opportunities for public consultation. And that's really crucial and has been emphasized to me in adopting this mandate. The conversation must take place with Albertans in a broad sense, not simply with a small cadre of administrative experts. But we will be reaching out to Albertans. We'll be reaching out to First Nations communities, to academia, to government, and of course to industry. I've had the privilege of working closely with industry and with governments federally and provincially for a long time, and we'll take advantage of that expertise. The timelines are short. The Premier has made clear that she wants to have a report in hand to formulate a new strategy well before the climate change talks in Paris in December. So let me wrap up by saying quickly that this is an opportunity that as an academic at a publicly funded university in Alberta, I don't think you can turn down. It's a wonderful chance. And it may be a little bit of karma. We teach this in our classes, and I'll often say to my students, you know, what would you do if the Premier called and said, how should Alberta change its climate change policy? Pretty exciting opportunity to live that example. So thanks for the opportunity. Thank you all.
Thank you. And now remarks from Brian Basjo, President and CEO of Capital Power.
Good morning. Thank you, Minister Phillips, for the opportunity to join you here today. We are proud to stand in support of this new SGER policy and in support of additional action to reduce Alberta's greenhouse gas emissions. Not only is it the right thing to do, it's the right time to do it. Capital Power is Alberta's leading developer of new power generation, and we've consistently supported efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, protect Alberta's air quality, and maintain a reliable and competitive electricity sector. We supported federal action to develop a fixed retirement schedule for coal plants and Alberta regulations to improve air quality. We brought new sources of renewable power to market, including our recently opened Halkirk Wind Farm just east of Red Deer. We've also invested in modern, cleaner natural gas facilities that will help meet Alberta's electricity needs as older coal-fired facilities are retired. And we've taken early action to develop Alberta's carbon market, investing in more than 35 local offset projects, and have created nearly 10 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions for the SGER program. Today, the SGER program changes are going to accelerate the transition to renewables and cleaner electricity sources and stimulate additional Alberta investment in Alberta-based projects that make real, verifiable reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. We're looking forward to continuing the conversation through Dr. Leach's advisory committee about climate change policy and over the next months to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian. Now remarks by Ed Whittingham, Executive Director, Pembina Institute.
Thanks, Matt, and good morning, everyone. I'll be brief. Minister Phillips, I want to thank you for the opportunity to be part of the Alberta government's announcement that is making good on its pledge to get serious about climate change. This is a step in the right direction. From its inception 30 years ago, the Pembina Institute has always maintained that real change is only possible through collaboration with government and industry. That's why I'm especially happy to be sharing this moment with Andrew and with Brian as well. Alberta was the first jurisdiction in North America to put a price on carbon. The Specified Gas Emitters Regulation held promise when it was first introduced in 2007, with stakeholders expecting it to be ratcheted up over time. And let's be clear, compliance under ESCR has been met mostly through contributions to the Technology Fund and offsets purchases. It's not an effective tool at driving near-term GHG reductions at the facility level, something that I think everyone in this room would agree that we need to do if we're to decrease Alberta's emissions on an absolute basis and do our fair share. Now, today's announcement is a first step toward establishing a more credible climate strategy in Alberta using the tools that we have in place now. The Alberta government's commitments to set a higher price and target for carbon pollution following a set schedule is encouraging. I'm even more encouraged by Minister Phillips' commitment to take further action following broad-based consultation. It will do more than the changes announced today by Alberta to credibly do its part to tackle climate change. Reducing overall emissions from the oil and gas sector, accelerating the phase-out of coal-fired electricity, increasing the supply of renewable energy, and promoting energy efficiency are all important aspects of developing a climate change strategy of which all Albertans can be proud. I think that's something we'd agree as well that we all want. We recognize the quick and decisive action that Premier Notley and Minister Phillips have taken to strengthen Alberta's emissions regulations using the tools that it has in place. And we look forward to seeing a more comprehensive climate strategy developed ahead of this year's UN conference on climate change in Paris. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. We'll now take questions from the floor, after which we'll take a few on the phones.
Sorry, I hate the term all things are on the table, but are all things on the table here? You're looking at, for example, phasing out coal, shutting down coal plants in Alberta.
You know, we are examining all of our options, and certainly our coal-fired electricity forms part of that. And so we need to examine how to do that moving forward, and that's going to take some time. That's going to form part of the review.
And on the issue of major reductions, carbon capture and sequestration, there's still 2 projects going ahead. I understand they're still going to go ahead. The Shell project, for example, you're not changing any of that.
We have contracts in place, and we intend to honor those contracts.
But when it comes to major reductions, that's part of the goal here, to figure out how to reduce your emissions by a massive amount every year.
That's right.
Will this include then ways of giving incentives to homeowners to reduce, not just big emitters, but small emitters too?
You know, Graham, the way I see this review moving forward is we have the issue of how we reduce greenhouse gas emissions across industry. And then we have the other 2 legs of the stool, if you will, which is how we get it right on efficiency, both for individuals, but also how we can ensure that we're supporting municipalities, First Nations, and so on to reduce their emissions and, of course, lower their costs. And then there's the other piece of it, which is how we incent a really strong green jobs, renewables economy, and how all of those 3 pieces fit together. So those are going to be the items of business from now until Paris.
According to Professor Leach's analysis of this is a 300% increase over the next 2 years in the cost of this program on producers. What impact is that going to have on Alberta's energy industry?
Well, but by the time the regulation is fully phased in, it's estimated it would cost between 30 and 45 cents per barrel of bitumen and $3.60 per megawatt hour of electricity generation.
Minister, how did you arrive by the numbers that you did have for the percentage and for the penalty? And did you ever consider the 40-40 option?
You know, we examined a number of options because there have been many numbers on the table over the years. This is a conversation that's been had between government and industry for quite some time, and it's one we inherited. And so we elected to take a no surprises approach with industry. It's what the pledge that Premier Langley made to industry, and we intend to make good on that pledge. So these were numbers that were discussed over long periods of time. When we assumed office, we began those consultations right away, and this was what we arrived at.
How much of this is your own doing and not the work of Mr. Prentice and the previous government?
You know, moving forward, we elected to take an important first step to signal a further action on climate change. That is something that we saw successive previous governments dither on, put it off. There was never any real decisions or leadership taken. And, our pledge during the election campaign was to exercise leadership nationally and internationally on climate change. And that's exactly the first step that we've taken today.
Will the two panels work together in any way?
Yes, that's in fact why I scooped my colleague today to indicate to you that in the coming days there will be a royalty review announcement. And our intention here is that these two processes work together. They are in lockstep with one another. They talk to one another on I can tell you on a daily basis, and so that we ensure that all of these various reviews ensure stability for industry, they ensure predictability for industry, and they ensure that we are putting the interests of Albertans first.
Minister, how long is it going to be before Alberta actually sees an absolute reduction in greenhouse gases?
Well, there will be some reductions achieved by this phased-in intensity-based.
But they're still going to go up year on year.
That's why we need to examine our options going forward. That's precisely for that reason, so that we can exercise leadership on climate change.
So how many years do you think it'll take before we actually start seeing some absolute reductions?
I'm not sure I can anticipate that question because I don't know the outcome of the review.
Do you have a goal in mind in terms of a percentage drop in emissions over 2005, for example?
There's so many different formulas, right? For targets, there are many different targets now nationally and internationally across provinces. So that is going to form part of the review. What is the baseline? What is the measurement?
The previous government put all of its eggs basically in the CCS, carbon capture sequestration. That was the one thing that plugged in this whole 140 million tons a year by 2050. If CCS is not really working out as planned, and it seems it's not, do you have any indication, any inkling in your mind as to what could fill that hole?
Well, I think we have, again, these sort of three pillars, right? And this is what's going to structure the conversations that Dr. Leach is going to lead over the coming weeks and months. And that is, we know we have a lot of work to do on various industrial sectors. We know that we are not quite getting it right on industry R&D, on innovation and technology. And so we know we need to do better. That's the first piece of this. The second piece is, of course, energy efficiency across the economy, not just for those of us who are looking to save a few dollars and improve our efficiency through a new furnace, but also for municipalities, First Nations, and so on. We need to figure out how to get it right on efficiency. And then that third pillar, really, they talk to one another, efficiency and renewables do, because they both concern, good green jobs, right? And how do we grow that renewable portion of our electricity generation, of our, and to grow our economy, right? So those are the three major themes that will run through the review, and the three items of business that, just small items of business that will be the focus of Dr. Leach's efforts over the coming weeks.
When will we see something on energy efficiency and renewable?
As a part of the review.
So we have to wait till December to find out what you're going to do in that regard?
Yes, because they have to work together. All of it has to hang together. Right, and also hang with the royalty review, right, and with the impact on the economy at the forefront of our minds.
Dr. Leach was saying that this is a bit of a rush job for Paris in December. I mean, is it, or why don't you just might it not make more sense to maybe just take some more time and make sure you get it right, given the ramifications?
What we need to do to establish leadership on a national and international stage is to ensure we have the right architecture for moving forward, and that's what we're going to take to Paris.
Have you calculated an effective price on carbon under the regulations you're announcing today? Well, you said that under the current
Yes.
regime, it's what, it's $1.80, I think the Pembina Institute is calculated as, and what's it going to be now under the your new regime?
Approximately $6.
$6 a ton?
That's right.
Will former Deputy Minister of Executive Council Steve McDonald be involved in this process going forward in any way?
Steve remains the deputy minister, in his role for now.
The main advisor on
Yes,
climate.
yes.
So how long will that continue?
I-
Will it go to the end of this process?
Yes, I believe so. I'm not actually privy to the details of his contract, but he remains in place. He's been a very valuable asset to this whole process.
Français, Madame Phillips, en quoi ça aide l'image de l'Alberta, ce que vous annoncez aujourd'hui, puis vous parlez de l'avenir? Est-ce que, par exemple, joindre une bourse du carbone avec le Québec et l'Ontario, est-ce que ça ferait partie des options?
Tout le monde sait au Canada et ici en Alberta que nous devons améliorer nos émissions. Alors, nous savons qu'il y a beaucoup d'intérêt à la part d'industrie pour avoir un prix sur le carbone. Nous savons ça. Nous savons aussi qu'il y a des autres modèles. C'est ça exactement que nous allons étudier pendant les prochains jours, semaines et mois.
Et vous le mentionnez en anglais, mais peut-être le réexpliquer parce que vous le disiez, il y a peut-être des gens qui vont critiquer ce que vous annoncez aujourd'hui. Vous pensez que ça peut aider l'image de l'Alberta, c'est ce que vous disiez?
Ben, certainement, ça va aider notre image parce que nous avons un plan et aussi une stratégie pour en avant de Paris. Et c'est exactement ça que l'industrie, les groupes environnementaux et les acteurs internationaux, c'est exactement ça qu'ils attendaient d'Alberta. Et maintenant, ils voient que nous allons le faire.
We'll have time for some more from the floor. We're going to go to the phones now. There's 7 callers. First caller, please. Is there a caller on the line, please?
Your first question comes from the line of Jeremy Van Loren from Bloomberg News. Your line is open.
Good morning. And just a question for Minister Phillips and perhaps Dr. Leach as well. I'm just wondering, as you go through the review, if there will be any jurisdictions in particular that you're casting an eye to in terms of being a model or a benchmark for Alberta.
Well, I'll just take the question first. Thank you for the question. I think we're going to examine how various jurisdictions are both dealing with carbon markets and pricing carbon, energy efficiency programs, and renewables. So, I'm not particularly wedded to one model. I know that we have a number of options on the table, and there's a number of people across the country and across the world who have ideas on what Alberta should do. My only guiding principle is that it puts Albertans first. It ensures employment and long-term economic stability for Alberta.
Next caller, please. Operator? Yeah, sorry.
Do you want me to take that? So thanks for that. I think we'll certainly be looking broadly. Our biggest challenge, I expect, will be reconciling stringency of policies, not so much the tools we use. So questions of where do we want to end up as a province will probably be the first order. And the second order is how do we get there, and making sure that we're putting forward options that reconcile those two, that we don't have a set of goals that are not consistent with the set of options that we present. So anything that's brought forward, examples in other jurisdictions, it will be a test of what would that look like if it were applied in Alberta? What does the best evidence tell us about what the outcome of that policy applied in Alberta? Or inversely, how would that policy have to be adapted to meet what we determine our goals for Alberta?
So where do you think Alberta should go? You mentioned it, Dr. Leach.
That's what we're going to hear over the next little while.
Do you think there's much chance of the current sort of carbon intensity model surviving the review?
I don't think there's a predisposition in terms of carbon intensity policies versus explicit carbon policies. What we'll really be looking at is the stringency of those policies, and there isn't a necessary relationship that says intensity policies are less stringent than carbon emissions on the whole policy. It's really a question of how you apply that policy, which emissions it gets to, and what type of an incentive does it create. So I expect we'll be hearing options on all of those fronts.
We're going to go back to the phone operator. Next caller, please.
Your next question comes from the line of James Wood from the Calgary Herald. Your line is open.
Hi, thanks for taking the call. I have a question and a follow-up. I just wanted to clarify, so you renewed the carbon levy today, but you're not precluding that this could get changed over ahead of the 2017 current expiration date that you put in now. You could put in a new system before that.
Well, whatever we do, it will be with a phase-in period, and it will be in consultation with industry. So what those timelines look precisely like right now, I'm not going to predetermine that outcome. But at the same time, we have made a commitment, Premier Notley made a commitment that there would be no surprises for industry, and so we intend to make good on that commitment.
And just to kind of maybe more explicitly of the last question you were asked is, what are your thoughts and what are the possibilities of introducing a broader-based carbon tax within Alberta or a cap-and-trade system for large emitters?
Well, I know that there is some interest by some in industry to implement a price on carbon. So we want to make sure we have a robust climate change strategy that's effective and affordable for families. That's very, very important to our government. But consultations throughout the summer will kind of give us an idea of where Albertans are at, share their prices on their thoughts on the pricing approach, what makes sense for our whole economy. And as for a cap and trade, a linked cap and trade model, I look forward to hearing the views of Albertans on this model. What I have heard so far is that there is a strong desire to ensure that whatever climate change strategy we put in place benefits new technologies, renewables, and efficiency here at home.
I have a question for you. More on a personal level, your history, you've been an outspoken advocate on the environment, fair enough, over the years. Now you're the Minister of the Environment. Well, what's that like for you, going from one world to another?
Well, I've worked for political change my entire life, and I've worked, within the NDP for almost 20 years. It's 30 days in now of being a minister, and, I have to tell you that this is exactly what I have worked my entire adult life for, which is exercising leadership on an important piece of public policy that can lead our country forward. One of the things that always drove me to be active in electoral politics in Alberta was that I could see where it was, in some ways, so easy for us to make positive, progressive change because we have so many of the tools at our disposal. We have an educated population, we have a vibrant economy. All of these pieces were in place, and in so many ways there was just a lack of government leadership. And I'm so pleased to be part of that now.
Is it easy then, what you're doing right now? Is it easy to make progressive change?
There's a lot of ways that we can make change because the previous government, there were so many things that they just ignored, or there was so much policy drift and so on that there are ways that we can make change, and it feels very good for that frustration of watching all of this potential being squandered for so many years to be able to actually reverse that.
Go back to that. We'll have time for questions, more questions on the floor.
Just to follow up, you said that the previous government ignored things and there was policy drift. What areas were ignored, do you think?
Well, I think we're the only jurisdiction to not have any kind of robust energy efficiency policy. Our approach to renewables has been somewhat haphazard. This conversation on renewing the ESCR has been going on for 2 years, and it's been extended and extended. And that was one of the reasons why we decided, no, we are not going to let it expire or renew it in its current form. We're going to take that important first step.
We're going to have time for a couple questions from the floor after we get through some of the call-ins. So, operator, can we have the next caller, please?
Your next question comes from the line of Chris Varco from the Calgary Herald. Your line is open.
Hello, Minister. Back in 2008, when the Stelmach government unveiled Alberta's climate change objectives, your party was very critical that the goals were too weak and that there wasn't enough action. Included in that was a goal to reduce emissions by 50 megatons by 2020. Will your government be able to reach those goals of the 50 megatons reduction by 2020?
You know, the higher price does create a stronger incentive to remove emissions on site. This will get us closer to our 2020 goal.
But will it allow you to exceed that goal that the Tories had committed to, number one? And number two is, had you given any consideration to increasing the price of carbon this year rather than waiting a year?
We haven't given any consideration to doing things in an immediate way because we made a commitment to phasing in our changes.
Thank you.
Okay, but to go back to the original question is, will you be able to meet that goal that the Tories had put in place for reducing emissions by 50 megatons by 2020?
This particular regulation will get us closer to that goal. It really depends on the other pieces of this, of whether we're able to make that goal.
Thank you. We're going to go to the next caller, please, operator.
Your next question comes from the line of Don Braid from the Calgary Herald. Your line is open.
Minister, the regulation changes you made today and the pricing changes you made today in carbon for the industry, can people in that climate and Albertans know that those are going to remain in effect through 2017, or is there a chance that you could actually change that as part of your large climate change bundle?
Well, anything that we do will be phased in, and it will be in consultation with industry. And so the precise timelines of that are a matter for the review, and will come as no surprise.
I believe we have 4 more questions from, one follow-up? Okay, I believe we have 4 more questions from the phones. Next one, please, operator.
Your next question comes from the line of Alex McQuaig from the Medicine Hat News. Your line is open.
Good morning. We heard a little bit about renewable energy, and I'm curious to see, how does in southeastern Alberta, we have a couple of renewable energy projects, and that already have regulatory approval. How will this announcement improve the financial viability of such projects, if at all?
Well, I mean, this is a signal to renewable industries that you know Alberta is reevaluating its approach to incenting and ensuring long-term economic development in renewable energy. I think that much is certain. What our policy architecture looks like is the matter for the coming review.
Thanks. And I think it was Mr. Bastro, I'm probably mispronouncing his name. I mean, he mentioned renewable energy and that being a component of these new regulations or today's announcement. I'm just wondering how that renewable energy piece fits into this announcement.
Well, you know, there are many companies in Alberta that have already made significant investments in renewables. Our job is to ensure the right policy environment and to ensure that whatever overall climate change strategy we are taking, we are making sure that we are deliberately putting in place an architecture that we can create green jobs, that we can keep Alberta's economy moving, and that we can build on top of our resource extraction economy, a renewable energy economy, so that we can be a fully energy economy, not just in one sense of the word, but in all of the senses of the word. And many folks in industry have already taken those steps, and we're very heartened that they have, and we're happy to work with them in order to make sure that we get it right coming out of this review.
Next question on the phone, please, operator.
Your next question comes from the line of Jeff Lewis from the Globe and Mail. Your line is open.
Hi, thanks for taking the question. Just 2 quick ones. In the industry, the energy industry, there's a heightened sensitivity to costs in the current environment. As you look to broader changes in the carbon regime, will you look to sync those to a particular oil price threshold? Thanks. And then I have a follow-up.
You know, again, I think that is a matter for the review. That is a matter for careful study that Dr. Leach will be undertaking, and to ensure that our climate change strategy talks to and works in lockstep with the royalty review.
Okay, and what consideration was given to syncing policies with Ontario and Quebec, and perhaps you can talk more broadly about interregional cooperation?
Well, I'm just recently arrived from the Canadian Council of Ministers of Environment. I arrived back yesterday, and we did have some very productive conversations with Quebec, Ontario, and BC, and certainly had a very nice chat with the Canada's ambassador to the United States on the topic of market access. So what I can tell you is I am having a look at their models, as is Dr. Leach, but what I can also tell you is that I hear from Albertans that whatever climate change strategy we move forward with must ensure that we are investing and in innovation in Alberta's natural resource sector and ensuring that the wealth generated from our natural resources production benefits Albertans and good Alberta jobs first.
Thanks. Just a couple more on the phone. Next caller, please, operator.
Your next question comes from the line of Jeffrey Morgan with Financial Post. Your line is open.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. I have a question to follow up. First question, can you make explicit what the goal is with the climate strategy that you're developing? Are you hoping to find a total reduction in emissions or just to slow the growth of emissions? What is the goal of the climate change strategy?
Well, I think that overall Alberta needs to align its approach to climate change with the rest of the world. We have now become something of an outlier, which is why I opened with the topic of our reputation. And so we do need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. We need to do that with a plan that is real, with an honest plan. And so that's why we are having a look at the 3 different ways that we can do that. What does our carbon pricing architecture look like? And then how do we ensure that we are investing in efficiency and renewables? And then how does that process talk to the royalty reviews so that we ensure that the health of Alberta's economy is put first in all of our decisions?
Okay, so it is an absolute reduction in emissions that you're targeting.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, the second question, is an early retirement or a sped up phase out of coal generation on the table one of the things that you're talking about?
Certainly that will form part of the review in the coming weeks and months.
So we have one last question, please, from the phone, operator.
Your final question comes from the line of Sean McCarthy from the Globe and Mail. Your line is open.
Yeah, hi. Just maybe a follow-up, although you've taken a couple stabs at this. In terms of, under the current ESCR, all offsets have to be done in Alberta. How open are you to, well, recognizing the emphasis on activity within Alberta, how open are you to engaging in some sort of market outset that would allow the purchase of credits and offsets from outside the province?
We've had some conversations with industry and others since assuming office, and I'm fairly open on the topic. My real guiding concern is how do we ensure that Alberta's climate change policy is delivering good jobs for Albertans, is ensuring our economy remains stable, and is ensuring that our climate change strategy leads essentially the world with respect to how natural resource producers can get it right with respect to climate change. And so Dr. Leach and I and others will be examining this matter in the coming weeks and months. I will tell you that it was Albertans that elected this government, and so we are in service of Albertans and ensuring that our economy is healthy and strong moving forward.
So we have time for 2 more questions from the board, please. Justin gets one.
Target of 50 megatons reduction by 2020. Is that still the goal? Surely you want to do better than that, don't you?
We do want to do better than that, and that's going to be the matter for the review. How we get there, right? We know that increasing this price and stringency will get us some of the way there. But we also know that there's a tremendous amount of work to be done, and there's a fairly short timeline to do it in with respect to those reductions. So we know that we are going to try to get to 2020, but part of this process is going to be what does it look like going forward after 2020?
Do you have any number in your head above 50?
Not right now.
Justin, please.
So you said that the current rules are obsolete. I'm just wondering, when you're going to Paris, is this going to be enough, you think, so that people take you a little more seriously?
Well, this is why we're going to review what will be enough, because we don't think that the current architecture is sufficient. We know that we had to take an important first step, and we are doing that, but that's why we are undertaking this a review process led by Dr. Leach so that we can have something to present to the international community in Paris that will be not just seen to be enough, but actually be enough. The approach we saw from the previous government was to, double down on a message that wasn't resonating, that didn't deliver, that didn't work. And as a result, we were not taken seriously on the national or international stage. And with this, that's going to change.
With this levy, though.
One follow-up and then one
I was gonna say,
last.
with this levy, though, specific to the levy, when you're in Paris, do you think people will take you more seriously?
I think that they will see that this is an important first step and that we had reviewed all of the other aspects of this in order to exercise, real leadership and deliver real results.
How will this policy that you've just announced today affect companies like Capital Power? How will it hit your pocketbook?
I'll let Brian answer that in his own words.
So every company has a different situation. We have the benefit that we've actually been investing for 8 years in carbon credits. So we've got a tremendous inventory that we'll call on that'll basically cover us substantially through to 2020. So financially, in terms of impact, isn't severe on us today, again, because in large measure because of that inventory. Post-2020, it becomes quite significant to us and certainly to other individuals or companies who have coal generation in particular. On the other hand, it does create stimulus to actually reduce carbon. One of the elements in the SGER regulations that's there today, and maybe I'll start my consultation with Dr. Leach right now. There's some tweaks to it that can actually lead to 20% carbon reductions, actual reductions, not payments into the fund. So there's a lot of things that can be done. There's a lot of potential, and can certainly we can, by our actions, mitigate our costs by taking those actions to actually mitigate carbon in our generation fleet. So.
And what will the phase out of your plants do to the price of electricity in the province?
That's a very interesting question, and that's why it's very important that this is done right. Because, if there's a dash to gas, as you've heard, that basically reduces coal emissions by half. But if there's a thoughtful renewable policy that brings in renewables, particularly when we need generation post-2020, you can conceivably see a reduction from the result of the retirement of the coal fleet to actually getting close to zero emissions, again, in a very orderly reduction in the coal fleet generation. So there's a tremendous potential there if it's managed properly.
Thanks very much. If there's any follow-up questions, my contact information is on the release. Thank you.